to fix them, but it's never going to be perfect. I said, if you want perfect, buy a car and live in it, because they can control everything with those, and they've engineered and they built 100,000 of them. This house is an experiment, and we'll see where it goes.
Welcome to this special edition of the Fine Homebuilding podcast with coverage from IBSx, the 2021 virtual experience. This is Senior Editor Patrick McCombe. Tonight I'm joined by Deputy Editor Matt Millham.
What's up?
Editorial Advisor Mike Guertin.
Hello.
And Bryan Uhler from Pioneer Builders.
Good evening.
It is a pleasure to see you guys tonight again. I'm grateful to have you on the show. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm a little embarrassed that Jeff already ducked out even before we got started, but what can we do really about that? Oh my God. So it was an interesting day at the Builder Show.
Yeah.
I don't want to belabor it, but I'm going to ask one of you, and I don't know if Matt, you're the right guy to ask, but so what exactly happened at the Home Builder Show today, Mike Guertin?
Oh, I thought you were going to go to Matt. So I got up early. I worked a little bit late last night and played around on the IBSx website with the little bit of functionality it had to get to the exhibitors, because I wanted to prepare for today, and got up early and did the same thing. Between about 6 a.m. Eastern and about 8:30 or 9 Eastern, the IBSx website worked, and you could get to 144 of the exhibitors. It looks like they have about 350, 360 exhibitors in total. So not all of the sites, not all of the exhibitor pages were working. And then somewhere around 9 o'clock, it logged me out. I tried to log back and it was just bounce. It was like ping pong, log in, log out. Then I got to pages with all sorts of things like this one, I wrote it down. It was like, your pass is not supported at this website or something like that. Anyway, they had technical problems only got worse. And by about 3 o'clock, both the kitchen and bath side of the show and the international builder side of the show put out a press release saying that they were just turning off all of the exhibitor part of the show, the expo side, for technical difficulties. And it sounds like their plan is, and they seemed a little positive about this, is that they're going to do it sometime in the future. Well, I think we can talk about that and what that means, when you try to do something at a future date when it's not co-joined with the whole build-up that we get with this whole IBS thing. In the midwinter. And then at that same press conference, in the letter they sent out via email to most all, if you were registered, you would have gotten this. They have education, that platform that they're using for the education is still working. So they're still doing the education. But like me, I'm cheap, so I don't get the all access pass, which is like $300 or $400. I guess those of you with press passes can get into some of those.
I'm going to interrupt you there. I have not been able to, but maybe Matt will be able to speak to that later. Or Matt, now, have you been able to get to you have, Brian?
I've gotten into them now because I think what Mike was about to get to is that they open it up to everybody. Like, so if you have a pass, it doesn't matter what kind of pass, they'll let you in now for those educational sessions. And really, I mean, that's some of the more interesting stuff. I mean, and if you like stuff, like the expo is the place to be. Yeah, if you like products, that's the place to be. But if you want to actually learn something, like the educational side of it is much better. And normally we can't get in there with a press pass, and now we can. So, I feel like in a sense, while it's kind of turned into the fire festival of building shows or trade shows, that it's like it may end up becoming a more enriching experience because I'll actually, get to see builderly stuff going on, like I would normally do at the show. I'd be able to see Mike Guertin, doing his demonstrations and other folks doing their stuff. But, I'm not exactly sure what it's going to look like in there. The presentations that I've been into so far this afternoon were basically just like almost PowerPoint presentations, but it was
So-
a little bit deadly. But
But for some of you who haven't been able to experience that, go to the builder show, either get there at all, or when you've gone, you've just had an expo pass like me and have not been able to go to the education side. If you've got that pass, the digital pass, tomorrow after you hear this podcast, go and check it out. You might find some things that that are worthwhile sitting in on. I'm hoping that they open up the on-demand stuff. Those were pre-recorded because there were a couple of good building science ones.
yeah,
I know like Christine Williamson was on one, Joe Stiebrick was on one, and a few other notable building science educator folks. So, check it out. See what you can get to for free.
yeah. I've been trying to get into those. I haven't figured out quite how to do that yet. So if I figure it out, maybe we can put that in the show notes.
I'll put some links or something in,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I accidentally ended up clicking on one that I knew I had no access to, and there was a guy on my screen talking to me.
Yeah.
So those of you listening out there, if you're trying to go to IBSx content, just try clicking on stuff and you never know, right?
That's what you do.
Exactly.
Brian, what was your experience like today? Were you shocked that this was still not resolved from yesterday?
I wouldn't say shocked, but it was pretty interesting to get all of these like emails right away. There was a press conference that.
Did any of you go to that? I'm sorry to interrupt you,
did.
Brian, but what'd they say?
Well, if you want the full story, I needed to get my haircut today. So as we're leaving, I had it on my phone and I'm waiting. And Ethan wanted to listen to Stuff You Should Know podcast. And I'm like, no, I'm working right now. So then they came on at 3:00 our time. And it was the NAHB and the KBIS. I think that there were two representatives, but in any case, they just apologized. They both had.
And that's the right thing to do, right?
Yep. And there was apparently a lot of people who gave positive comments. I mean, to my knowledge, nothing has ever been tried like this before. And so it was merely a matter of the exhibitor booth. And it was very, you couldn't put your finger on what the problem was. And I think that was what was so baffling for them. So the exhibits isn't quite what I would be as interested in electronically anyway. I would be much more interested in that in person. So to have all of this on-demand stuff, I'm on Huber's site right now. Ben Bogey's up there. The on-demand stuff, I can now just at my own pick and choose catch some of these things. That's one of the biggest problems is the show is so huge and there's an expiration. It's like either I'm going to be here for this or I'm going to be here for this. And you just have to keep on moving. With this, now I've got some time to go back and actually digest some of this stuff.
I think that's a really good point. I also found it interesting that not all the booths were down. Like, for example, the Pro Builder show homes that I talked to you guys about earlier were up and running. I was able to go to the Huber booth and see some of the presentations from the day before. So I did learn from Huber that they had contracted with a company outside the IBSx experience to host their virtual experience. And I said it to my colleagues long ago, if a trade show company can make this work, it's going to change the industry. If a trade show company can't make it work, it's going to be individual companies who take their virtual experiences directly to the customer without the need of any trade show experience. And it doesn't even have to be on a certain day. Like Brian was just alluding to, it could be at any time at your convenience to learn stuff.
Yeah.
It's like
Did you
this
ever
whole.
get in? Oh, go
It's
ahead.
like the whole year has been. We've been just trying stuff, throwing it against the wall, seeing if it works in a digital realm, and then regroup and see what works, what doesn't, and make adjustments. And a lot of this stuff is going to land for all kinds of business stuff. I've talked to some builders who have not ever met with their clients in person, done it all over Zoom, and they're building them a house, which to me is kind of, I mean, I know it's been
Kind
done
of
before, but
awesome.
it's kind of, well, it's just, it's just a different way of communicating, really, is what it comes down
Wouldn't
to.
it be great though to not have to leave your office and you could, meet with clients in almost as good an environment without having to make a trip to the job site and all the time that involves?
Yeah.
A lot of younger builders have been digitally connected a lot more so than us old guys. But what I think is done for a lot of the older customers, which in my market tends to be people that are
Your clients.
right. And for them, it's all of this has forced those older clients to go online, to figure out how to use their camera on their phone, to figure out how to use, FaceTime or YouTube Live or some way to communicate directly, Zoom, what have you. So now a contractor can do a virtual tour so that the clients don't have to actually go to the job, especially if it's an out-of-state client. And a lot of contractors have been working for clients that are out of state because they're having remodeling done to their homes.
Or they're having a retirement home built, or their
Something like
second home built, or whatever.
Yeah, I've used that a little bit. We had a house that was finished. And like I said yesterday, usually I get to walk through with the prospective buyers and show them things. Well, all of a sudden, when our state was shut down due to COVID, it was like, oh man, how am I going to do that? So my wife just videotaped me doing a home tour with a bunch of little videos. And then I just put them up on YouTube, did a playlist, and then let my real estate broker know that. And she was able to link it to her listing. So I ended up getting to walk through with a couple from California. And basically their expression was, we feel like we already know you, because they had watched the videos and they bought the house.
Great. That's fantastic. That's fantastic.
Bryan, was it like hard to get there? Did you just do that with your phone? I mean, did you have to rehearse? Did you have to plan your shots? How did that work?
We just made it up as we went along. Yes, there could have definitely been higher production value, but I'm just going to talk about what's in the house. I'm not much of a salesperson. And I think that kind of resonates with people, that it's not scripted. It's just me talking, just like
It's
we're
about
doing here.
you talking about your house that you're selling.
I think it develops a level of trust too, because they're not seeing something that's scripted. They're seeing you, the contractor, who's putting together this house, and then you're pointing out all the things that you're really excited about. The features that you've put in that house and why you've done it. I'm sure you did a really good job. I'm going to have to go look at those.
Well, I don't know if it was a really good job. I'll tell you a couple of other things that we do, and it's trying to do something better, even from the marketing side, every home. So we've got these little cards that we put up next to each room that itemizes out all of the features. And we use museum putty that, hopefully doesn't take the finishes off, and just stick it up there. And it's very well tailored so that when people come, they can take a look. What our agent does is she takes a picture of each one of the cards with the room so she knows what the features are. And then we have a brochure that it has, 30 things on there, features. And then there's a separate column, home number 2, and then a separate column, home number 3, with check boxes. And so as people go from house to house while they're looking, they can go, oh, well, this one has fall protection already installed. Then if they're talking to somebody else, hey, do you have anchor points? They may never have thought of such a thing. And then the real estate agent's going, I don't know if it does that.
I can't wait to ask my next real estate agent that. Oh, man.
I can tell you, if you wanted, because we talked about that earlier, the other thing that I've got in there is a little 2-page front and back printout. And I think I called it, Why is this home so comfortable? And I tried to break it down as simple as possible with the different mechanical systems, the building envelope, and how all of it's interrelated.
I'm going to interrupt you, Bryan. So the challenge with folks who know about this stuff is to not make people's eyes glaze over, but still show them that there's value behind the things they can't see. How do you do that? What are the actual words to use to explain to people why your house is more comfortable?
So one of the things is explaining that the house is tighter, and so you have to have fresh air for the occupants. Do you want to just bring in cold air that's 32 degrees, or do you want to temper that a little bit and warm it up a little bit? And so talking about the ERV and how that works. We use mini splits in all of our houses. So with the VRF technology, trying to analogize it to, and I didn't come up with this one, but to a car, when you're driving around town, sometimes you need to be going 60 on the highway. Sometimes you need to be going 20 in a school zone. Sometimes you're going uphill, sometimes you're going downhill. It's just logical. You would want your mechanical system to regulate to what the needs are. So trying to keep it as simple as possible, and yet not to think people are idiots. You know, one of the last houses we sold, it was a mechanical engineer. We've sold to more engineers than any other profession out there, as you might assume. But
I tell people with some great pride that a lot of our listeners to the Fine Homebuilding podcast are engineers we've figured out, which is kind of cool.
Not surprised.
What else do you tell them about your homes? How do you explain that air tightness matters?
You know, I could pull it up if I wanted to. It's just kind of the same idea. You want to have your house conditioned from the inside and not being like the outside environment. You know, the expression is the built environment. We've created our own little fishbowl, as Christoph Irwin calls it. We might not think we're in a fluid, but we are. That's what the air is.
Yeah.
So we're managing that. We're these little fish inside a fishbowl. You want that water clean. How are you going to do that? With your filters. Things that resonate with people are LEDs. They understand what an LED light is. So making sure that they know that there's LED lights. Just simple things.
What about appliances? Like, how do you choose what to put in your? I mean, do you have appliances when you have a spec, or is that stuff put in later?
Our standard package is a fireplace. We pretty much always put in. If we've got the infrastructure, sometimes we'll go natural gas. Other times we have to do propane. If we do that, because we have gas piping already going in the home, we'll typically do a propane or a natural gas stove. If it's a higher end house, we'll do dual fuel. So we'll have the cooktop will be gas, and then the heating element in the stove will be electric. So that's definitely an upgrade. There was a push here in Washington State to get away even more so from fossil fuels, or I should say there is a push. I think Seattle is kind of leading the charge there. I really struggle with that, even though I know it has to do with carbon, because when your power goes out, to have a source of fuel heat. Now we do a generator, a backup generator, transfer switch, that standard for somebody to plug in. But what if they run out of gas to their generator and we get some really bizarre cold spell? So to me, yeah, all of this energy efficiency and everything is great, but we kind of don't want people dying in our homes. So I think we have to have a source of heat that's not contingent upon one of those other sources.
Sure. I'm going to step back to the show for a minute, but I have some other questions regarding what it's like to be a new home builder for both Mike and Bryan here in a minute. Matt, I'm going to ask you, what was your impression of the show when you woke up and tried to go see some stuff there? Were you surprised?
This morning?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I tried to log in. I was never able to see the Fine Homebuilding booth, and I wanted to see if I could actually get in and see what was going on in there. And still no dice. Never saw it. I don't know if it ever worked. I don't know if anybody ever saw it.
It's amazing. It's fantastic.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I wanted to see all the dancing people and everything. I'm sure we had all kinds of stuff. We had a hula hoop demonstration. Yes. I mean, it was going to be nuts. So
the waterfall.
I'm really sorry everybody missed it. The axe throwing competition that you and I did. No.
I was looking forward to seeing the waterfall drape around the table in the front of the booth.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like we usually
It's always so attractive, right?
Yeah. A stack of magazines and, Maureen and Kelly standing behind it. That's the only thing I probably miss about, being in person is being able to see some of those people. But yeah.
I miss that. People stopping by and saying hello. That's fun. It's fun.
Yeah.
Did you get a chance to go to any educational presentations, Matt?
I did go to a couple this afternoon, just the ones that I could actually, sort of get into on the schedule that I was on, I guess. I didn't even try until after that press conference. I had tried earlier in the day to see if I could get into any of that stuff on a press pass, and I couldn't figure out how. And after they announced it, then I was scrambling around trying to figure out how to do it. So
did you go to the press conference like Bryan?
No, I didn't even know that was going on. They had sent an email, a pretty lengthy email, explaining, basically that they were bailing and apologizing and, telling everybody they were going to refund their money. But, that was kind of shocking, because they'd put up this sort of green screen explanation about, that they were working behind the scenes to try to get everything back up. And that had been up for most of the day. And just to see that they, kind of just decided to cut bait and push it back to another day.
I feel really sorry for the people on the technology side, both whoever contracted with the NHB to do this and the folks on the NHB side. I would not want to be them. I feel bad for them. It's and like Mike said, no one has done a trade show that attracts 50, 60, 70,000 people on the web.
I imagine, the traffic it seems like a very complex thing to put together, and you've got all these, booths and everything. I'm not sure exactly what the infrastructure looks like on the back, but then I think about, like the New York Times website, and they probably have like 1 million people on there every morning at least checking. And I'm like, is it equivalent or no? I don't know
either.
No. That's the other thing. I was like, when did they decide to actually, put this together like this? Did they realize early on, or did they sort of like wait to the last minute? Like, oh no, we're not going to have vaccine. We're not going to be doing this in person. We need to get on the stick.
Go ahead, Bryan, Mike?
I feel really bad for the exhibitors. Remember when we spoke to Ed a couple days ago from Federa? And he said that, they had been doing everything that they could to encourage their regular customers and people they hadn't even met yet to come to the show and be part of it. And he said they actually spent more money than they would have had they done a live exhibit at the IBS and the KBIS. So, it's one thing if the IBS returns the money for the exhibit space, so to speak, but there are all these other costs that these exhibitors have incurred that there's no way to really recapture, unless they do something a month or 2 months from now. And it's going to be curious if you can develop that same kind of anticipation and then get everybody to go to it.
It better work the next time. That's all I can say, right?
Yeah.
If they have any hope of making this go in the future, it's got to work.
Yeah.
Bryan, did you go to any of the seminars today?
I logged into one and had it on in the background for a little bit. I got 2 screens, so a lot of times I'll have 2 things going on at the same time. So I didn't pay really close attention to it, but I almost could see them filming some of these things in person if we end up doing that, and then having them post them for on demand. I almost view this as a loss leader. Yes, people might lose money this time, but they might be able to recoup some of that investment in the future from lessons learned. Inexpensive lessons learned, but we
all go through it.
Say?
Speaking of which, so last night, Mike asked you a really good question, Bryan, and I wanted to talk a little bit more about it. You're in a competitive real estate market. You're building homes for new home buyers, and they have other builders in the similar price point to could buy homes from. How do you decide what upgrades make sense to do to your homes to make a better house? And how do you get clients to see value in the things that aren't the finishes, aren't the shiny things? Like we talked a little bit about it with energy efficiency, but there are other things you guys do, I'm sure, that other builders don't do. How do you absorb those costs, and how do you get clients to absorb those costs?
I think one of the things, because our houses do sell for more money and they're listed at a higher price, is we wait until the house is done before listing it. So that is one of the big things, because most people, if the house is under construction or they're just looking at plans in a vacant lot, they're not going to understand if you're talking intangibles at that point. But if you can walk through, and I might have mentioned yesterday, Timmy hand cuts our roofs. He really builds a sturdy house. You know, we put so much nails in our sheathing here. We've got hold downs like you wouldn't believe because of the seismic design category. They just feel solid. And so there is kind of this sixth sense, you might say, that when you go through a place that feels stout. So I think that's part of it. The house is finished. The fit and finish is there. So there's just not a bunch of glaring things. I'll tell you, our houses make sense. Mom and Dad, our joke is we've made every mistake at least once. So we've got 40 plus years of making mistakes and then hopefully not repeating those mistakes. So just having a floor plan that flows, it is shocking how many low-end spec builders don't build with a good floor plan. So those types of things do resonate with people. I think, as I mentioned yesterday, trying to do a different thing per home. So by this point, we've incorporated a ton of things. We have a reputation in the area. We just had a house under contract, which unfortunately, I found out yesterday, flipped because the appraisal came in tremendously low. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous.
What do you do?
But we looked at the numbers. Can we make it work? And the answer was sayonara. So it's back on the market. You know, you can't go broke making money, but like Dad's old boss used to say, what we lose on each house will make up for in volume. Doesn't work that way. So you have to have profit and cover your costs. It just is what it is. 10 years ago, might have said a different answer, maybe more like 13 years ago.
Yeah, but how do you know it's going to appraise enough the next time, which may be weeks or months from now?
This gentleman didn't want to work. So appraisers, just like everybody else, you're going to get those who are good and professional, and then you'll get those who aren't. And he just wasn't interested in putting any work into figuring out why there was value. We had a HERS rating done. He didn't care. So that was part of why we got the HERS rating, was because then you have a third-party source. Nope. He just wasn't going to do it. But I bring that up to say the person who was purchasing it was a real estate broker, and he said up front, it's a pioneer home. We won't get a home inspection done. We just know it's a good home. So we do have a reputation because we've got enough experience and history here that that helps. Real estate agents, they like our houses. They like to show them. They like that the builder will meet with the customers. When I go through, the real estate agent 9 times out of 10 just takes a step back and lets me do my thing. They'll just be over texting or whatever they're doing there. And then I tell them, I'll take off now. You guys have private things. You don't need the builder hanging around. So I respect that they need to be able to speak candidly without the builder pushing them. You know, and I'll tell them, great, if we get an offer, that would be wonderful. And if not, best wishes to you.
Mike, I'm going to ask you the same question. Like, how do you get clients to see value in things they can't see when they're walking through a house? And who pays for that?
So I struggled with this since the late 80s when I first got into building, high performance homes, which at the time back then wouldn't even meet minimum energy code today. But back then, when you put in a energy or heat recovery ventilator, or you put in, extra insulation or airtight, construction and things like that, there was we thought we could sell it, but there wasn't something to sell. Just like Bryan said, that's not what people are thinking about. It's not till they can walk through the finished project and then get the sense of how the walls feel, the quietness in a well-built, solid house. But we overbuilt. Usually we build 1 to 2 spec homes a year. We were mostly a custom home builder. So on the custom home side, we would try to sell all of these different things that we could do. We knew we could do. And most customers were like, no, I don't need 2x6 walls. 2x4 is what everybody else has. They didn't see, going with dense packed cellulose. They just go, yeah, fiberglass is fine. We don't need it airtight, and on and on and on. But most of our clients that we did get for custom homes after a while were engineers. And because they understood. You can talk dollars and cents with them. You can talk indoor air quality. You could talk performance of different components of the house, be it
the whole field of
system.
Engineering is based on like cost trade-offs, right?
Yep.
It's like what they do.
We could show, and I can think of one house we built for an engineer client, high-end, very, very high-end house, and he and his wife were embarrassed to go to neighborhood parties. Well, I should say it different. They did not want to embarrass their neighbors when they went to neighborhood parties and they just talk about home and family and all that they were paying $140 a month in the middle of winter in New England when it was, in the 20s and 30s for their heating and all their electric. And their neighbors were paying about $800 a month. So the engineers got it. They said, we'll put the money in up front. We got this. This makes perfect sense. Payback period was like 4 years. The guy had calculated it out. But when I have done spec houses, there's that, how far can I go before I've exceeded what the market will allow? And very often I overdo it just because
your own personal ethics, right?
Yeah. I want to do the best I can, but you're still cutting back is hard. Where do you cut those corners? You don't want to cut it on anything that matters. And to me, energy performance matters, and putting in a good ventilation system matters, and all the way down the line. So it's a hard thing. And the same on remodels as well. I do a lot of, I won't say a lot, but some flip. So when you go in on a flip, you gotta
can't fix everything.
Trade it off. Nope.
Yeah, I think another component of it for me is my dad. I think we told the story last year, but he went to college, went to Vietnam in the real estate corps, but he went to college for finance and accounting. So when he got into building, he was a comptroller. And then when I went to college, I went for business and finance. I still do the guy's payroll. I still do our job costing. Every month I'm checking to see where things are coming in at. I would like to think we're a rationally driven builder. And so you have to make those decisions. I think it's great when somebody wants to build a passive house and get down to negative 500 air changes per hour. But that doesn't make any kind of sense for us to do. So we are always looking, and Timmy is very much on the same page. Value engineering is an intrinsic part of our ethos. Everything we think about, and we just throw out if I can say it, the baby with the bathwater if we can. So I'll give you an example. We're working with the company Huntsman Building Solutions. We're going to end up doing a hot roof, although I did just email the code officials to make sure that they're going to be okay with what we're proposing. But in any case, we did 2x12 rafters instead of 2x10 because we don't need the depth like we normally do. Normally, if we do a vaulted ceiling, we've got our 2-inch channel and then 9.25-inch bat for R38 at the roof line. In this case, we get to eliminate 2 inches, probably more if the spans would allow it. But we're just trying a little bit on every house. We're not cutting our bird blocks. We're not cutting the blocking at the top for the diaphragm that's required per the engineer because we're high seismic. So I asked Timmy yesterday, did you notice a difference? Oh, yes. Going from 2x12 to 2x10 is so much easier on the body. So even if they had to, in one location, tighten up to 16-inch spacing over 24, he would rather manage one more rafter or two if they're opposing and work with 2x10s all day long. Can we go down to 2x8? So with lumber basically being worth gold right now and always being, with your finger on the pulse of costs, because I'm not just project managing, I'm doing the number side, it makes those decisions rational decisions instead of ego driven. I hope.
What do you think about all this, Matt? Would you be a successful builder? Would you be able to, dial back your ethos to make a buck?
I think I'd have a hard time, initially, but I think after I lost money on the first house, I'd wisen up. And if I still had enough money to make a second house, then I'd probably do it differently. Yeah. I don't know. Bryan, I follow you on Instagram and I watch a lot of your stuff, and, you have some opinions on like airtightness that might be considered controversial in, like the fine home building community. But at the same time, and when you talk about it like this, like it makes total sense that, you don't have to chase every little tiny leak.
You can't, or I wouldn't. What my biggest fear, I shouldn't say biggest, I'm sure I've got larger fears than this. I don't want to run my dad's business into the ground. And a lot of times, I think the first generation in a family business does great. And then the second generation does okay. But it's really hard to pass that along to the third generation. So that's something that I really want to do. Is it would be pretty embarrassing for me to run dad's company into the ground. I love, what Steve's doing, what all these guys are doing. Reisinger on his personal home. It's incredible. Oh, I'll give you an example. A company reached out to me to do windows. On this particular home, I think they probably would have been like passive house level. When we built this house last year, the year before, the window package, vinyl windows, nothing crazy. It's like $3,500. Okay. So I priced it out with this other company, and I was very upfront with them. They said, hey, we'll give you a discount. They want some exposure on Instagram, this and that. I said, we probably won't be able to use you. I don't want to waste your time. Don't worry about it. I get their bill, and I don't even think it included a sliding glass door, and it was like $13,000. I don't know if that even included shipping or there was some or sales tax, which we would have to pay here. I would run the company into the ground if I decided, nope, this house needs passive house windows. So this is the market that we're going for. But if we were a custom home builder, I get emails all the time from people asking us to build for them. I just don't have the bandwidth. And I would rather project manage, work with Timmy. Our change order can be as simple as, hey, we really should open up this hallway here so that we can look down into the great room. Let's look at the shear wall plan. Hey, there's no shear walls here. Hey, how high do you think the sill should be? All right, we'll get it done. That's our change order. As opposed to with a homeowner, it would be so much work and so much time. So I've tried to structure my life to take the least amount of time that I can and maximize it all the time, if that makes any kind of sense.
So I got a question. You have done some custom home building at times, right? And
yep.
So the way your business is structured, you find that, well, let me take a bigger picture. Which can be more profitable for you? I'm guessing it's what you're doing now, but and do you know what the reason is that, or what would are you a spec builder because you like that? I'm asking an awful lot of questions at once. Sorry. My brain works faster than my mouth, or is it the other way around? Are you a spec home builder because you like the simplicity of building the way you want to build for the market and then letting them come to you, and then you don't have the hand holding and all of that? Or do you do it because it's more profitable?
All of the above.
Okay.
The amount of time it takes to do a proper custom home is astronomical. We would do fixed price contracts with allowances We never did cost plus. I think part of that comes back to our financial background and bidding things out and locking things down and what have you. But for us, another factor that I don't think maybe everybody thinks about is when you own your own land, you're kind of in the driver's seat as far as litigation is concerned. So I mentioned yesterday I'm risk averse as far as water. I'm risk averse as far as getting sued. So when you are building on somebody else's dirt, they're in the driver's seat. So a lot of builders may not have had bad experiences, but if you've been building long enough, you've had bad experiences. So if I can really be streamlined and efficient with my use of time, and then I think the other side of it is we are a home building company, but we're also sort of an asset company in that we have land.
Mm-hmm.
And so you not only make money off of hopefully the construction, your labor, subs, materials, etc. But if values of land are going up, then that's also a factor. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's how a lot of, the bigger home builders approach it, like they're real estate, like they're in real estate. They're not in a home building.
I think they make very little money on the buildings. I think they make the money on the piece of property that they bought from a farmer, right?
Right. Yeah. The 1,000 acres that they've broken up into 1,000 lots.
Yeah.
That's the expression, you make your money on the purchase price of the land.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you buy the land for too expensive, it just squeezes you too tight.
Yep.
I wanted to ask you guys also another question related to building for clients. Some new homes for clients, some folks are very tolerant about like drywall cracks and doors that start to stick or any of the small things that happen with a new home, right? Cracks in the concrete slab in the garage. These things are inevitable. Are there some things that people tolerate and other things that they just will not? Are there things that we should be putting our efforts to keeping folks happy when we're building them a new house more than others?
I'll go first. I think it's the personality of the customer. I really do. There are some customers I will never hear from them again. And then there's other ones, ... But I do think setting the expectations can be helpful. Like the expression, when you walk through and you go over a garage slab, you say, there's two types of concrete. There's concrete that cracks now. And then you hope that they can fill in the blank, but sometimes maybe you have to say, in concrete that cracks later. So don't worry if you see little cracks in the concrete. Obviously if there's massive differential displacement or something like that,
that's not the stuff I'm talking about. I'm talking about the normal stuff that builders expect to happen.
I think just setting the expectations up with some of those things up front is helpful.
What are some of the things that people have freaked out to you about, Bryan?
Well, I just got a phone call yesterday. I just haven't called the gentleman back because I honestly haven't had time. I put exhaust fans in his bathroom. I bought them from a big box store. They were LED, kind of like flat discs. And then the air for the exhaust would come up and out through the top of them. So he called me last week. I was on a job. And he wanted to replace the LED portion of them. Because that's one of these big things that I've got in the back of my mind is LEDs are supposed to last for 20,000 hours. I've got my questions on the manufacturing process and if we're really going to see that happen. But I said, boy, I think I bought them at such and such a place because he just absolutely could not find them. So then I got a call later and he's really wanting me to track down more information. So I'll dig back into the archives and try to find something. He says that all of his exhaust fans have water sitting on the top of them. It's out of warranty. There are those builders perhaps that would say, boy, we're going to do everything we possibly can to make sure. Well, he already knows, he's dealt with me before. I'll do what we're supposed to do, but I can't manage occupant behavior. So sometimes you have to say no to something up front with what you're willing to do and not do, and kind of, I hate to say it, but treat them like kids so that they know where their boundaries are.
That is sage advice, man. Mike, what bugs people and what doesn't bug people?
It's I've seen the whole range. For some people, it's what I would think are the silliest little things that they could resolve themselves. Like, for instance, handles doorknobs that are square or rectangular, and it twists a little bit. And they go, they're all twisted. Can't you make them stop doing that? I was like, well, don't crank it with your hand. It's the, setting the boundaries for the little children, I guess. But then for other people, I never hear from them again. I set up since around 2000, I started doing, after I'd finish a home, I say, I'm coming in, whether you want me or not, I'll be here in 1 month. Then I'm going to be here again in 3 months, then again in 6, then in 12. And then I'll do once a year for the next 2 years. So 2 more times. And what I set up by doing that, because what I found is that most people, when they're getting a new house, they don't, even though I give them the manual, which is an accordion folder about a foot thick with all of the literature, and I explain it to them, like, you've got all of these really cool things in your house. Here's the information. I used to spend a half a day to try to walk people through. Here's how this works. Here's how the thermostat works. Here is where the filter is and how to change it. Here's all the things you need to know. And I found that after about an hour, people's eyes would gloss over. And I realized that I was giving them too much information that they weren't ready to absorb. So I found that by doing, after a month and then 3 months, they could develop the questions in their mind, and they knew I'd be coming. So that's when they would hit me with everything. And I was prepared for it, and I budgeted for it. So by kind of, my mind was in the right frame, their mind was in the right frame, so everything worked smoothly. So once I started implementing that kind of a process, nothing ever came up from customers that were just like these off the wall things that they were just like kind of like nitpicky about. They kind of expected the little problems because I list them out. Here are the things that are probably going to happen the first, few months. You're going to get some shrinkage. You could get a little crack here. You could get, these things are going to happen. And then here are the things that can be done to fix them, but it's never going to be perfect. I said, if you want perfect, buy a car and live in it, because they can control everything with those, and they've engineered and they built 100,000 of them. This house is an experiment, and we'll see where it goes.
I would say too, Patrick, there was a custom home, a point that I learned like close to 20 years ago, and it always stuck with me. It said there's 3 types of builders. There's the builder who has problems and runs around all day long, like a chicken with his head cut off, putting out fires. Then there's the second builder who runs around all day long, putting out fires, but he's really good at it. And then there's the third builder who runs around all day long, putting out fires, but then he stops and thinks, why did the fire start? And he changes his process. So if you get a crack that's on an LVL beam because the drywall finisher or hangers decided to split their seam on the beam, and it is always a problem thereafter, then you learn to put in your workflow, walk through with the hangers and point them to, here's a post, don't split anything on this. Here's a beam, make sure you span it. When it comes to the windows. So we're small enough, and that's a big part, is I have the time to go through with these guys. I'm not a jerk to them, but to explain some of that stuff, and then you're there. I just talked to our tile guy this morning. He wanted to know when he was going to get started. He wanted to make sure that we had room that he had room in his schedule for us. So he was wondering, okay, so will the walls be painted? Will you have your air sealing done? He knows about aero barrier because he's worked with us for so long.
I think that alone tells me that you've, advanced beyond the 99 percentile of American builders. If your tile setter knows that they need to do their work after the process of air sealing has been accomplished.
Yeah. So I think that's a big part of it, is try to eliminate having those types of problems. And most of them you can if you're slow enough and methodical enough.
And I would guess at this point, if you use the same trade contractors from one job to the next, once you show them what your particular, what you've learned, where the problem points are that they can easily adjust for, once they learn what you like, you don't have to really reiterate it over and over and over again.
Yeah, and I'm pretty easygoing with them. I don't spend a whole lot of time giving them everything under the sun. It's progressive improvement. I try to do that with myself and with them. Mistakes are going to happen. You get the guys who, with our OSB shear walls inside, what is it, a 3x5 box for your switches?
Mm-hmm.
And what do they cut out? Just this huge mammoth pole.
Yeah.
Well, what are you going to do? You can get all bent out of shape, or when I walk through with their boss, just explain to them what's going on. And he goes, I know exactly why they did it. Well, it makes it easier for them to do their nailing. So we use the same electrician on every job. Now they know not to do it in the future. So that is a big part, is we don't go low bidder. And I think that even speaks to your first question there, one of the first ones, Patrick. We don't go low bidder with any of our subs. I don't beat them down on price. I think they deserve a vacation. They deserve to treat their families well. It results in a more expensive house, but you're going to get more out of your trades if you treat them that way.
I think that's one of the themes I've heard so often in business discussions, is that charge enough to do a good job. Like if you're trying to save nickels, you're not doing your customer any favor. It just charge enough to do a good house.
Hey, Patrick, do you want to talk at all about the things we have seen at the IBS Expo, or do you got other things to talk about?
No, this is why we're here. Okay. Keep in mind, we're going to have to talk about the Builder Show tomorrow, Mike. And the situation is likely to be the same. But
we're not going to learn anything new between now and then. Well, you know what? Let me, because the exhibits are down. Actually, okay, so I found a workaround to the exhibits being down, which is what I was doing last week and the week before. Going to there is a PDF of all of the exhibitors at the Builder Show website, and I counted them, and there were
144.
No, that was the amount. 144 were the amount that yesterday we were able to interact with. The other 236 or so, or 220, we weren't able to access. So there were about 366 or 367 from what I could tell. What I couldn't figure out is whether that was IBS plus KBiz or that was just IBS. But in any event, I did go to one. As I was looking through the ones I could access this morning before the site went down, I lowered my standard for what I would ordinarily look at. Usually, like Bryan, you walk up and down the aisles at the Builder Show, and you kind of key in and you quickly evaluate, is that worth my time to stop and ask a question? Am I going to learn something that either a product I can use or whatever? You're going to learn something, see something, find out something that's useful. I usually have a pretty high standard for that. Well, I lowered my standards because there were only 144 to choose from. So I landed on Forever Lawn. And, at first I shook my head and I go, nah. And then I thought, wait a minute.
So what's Forever Lawn, Mike?
So Forever Lawn is AstroTurf. Well, AstroTurf is a brand name, but it's imitation lawn, synthetic, to replace your grass.
Sounds lovely.
Put grass where you can't grow it, or where you shouldn't grow it, like in desert areas. It looks very attractive. What I noticed looking through the exhibitor site is that it's come a long way from the fake green carpeting that they called, lawn, fake lawn 10 or 15 years ago. they've actually come a long way in the fibers they're using, the durability, and the practicalness. At least it looked like. And a lot of it is in the base preparation. Think about the base preparation that we do for our hardscape, putting down pavers. You know, you got to have a sub base, a base, you got to do compaction, you got to make sure you have drainage. All of that is very similar to what you need in order to do a proper forever lawn. And then you seam these sheets together, and they have different border up, you know, different ways you can do your borders to make sure that it, you know, doesn't just wrinkle up and fall apart at the edges. And man, it's like, I'm thinking about it. I, for years, never had a lawn because I hated mowing and maintaining it with the chemicals you had to put on to make it look good. This stuff looks good no matter what the weather is. I went a little bit further to figure out, were they selling direct to contractors, or what the proposition was with the Exhibitor. It's they are there at the IBS to find dealer installers. So you would get a territory.
There you go, Matt.
And it's a $30,000 to $50,000 investment. They have 59 current dealers throughout the United States, and one in Manitoba, or maybe it was Saskatchewan in Canada. Surprisingly, I would have thought these would be really popular in places like the desert Southwest, Southern California, Arizona, parts of New Mexico, Utah, you know, Nevada, places where they are water constrained, where they are paying people to take their lawns out, where people might want to have some green. But when I looked across the distributor map, the dealer map, there were actually places all throughout, pretty evenly throughout the country, and in very wet zones. They actually had 4 or 5 in the state of Washington. No, there were 5 or 6 in Washington. And you would think, come on, Washington, lawn is like easy to grow there, isn't it?
On the west.
I would think. Well, yeah, I guess west of the Cascades. But
well, having it not be too wet for too long, most everything ends up getting mossy where we're at.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah. Even
so maybe that's
because of the latitude, you just don't get as much sunshine.
Oh, that's
so we
true.
get a little bit more, what do they call that? Cooling degree days than heating degree days. So yeah, solar is not the best thing here either, just because of the latitude.
So maybe that's why Forever Lawn's got some distribution up your way. So of the 59 current dealers, they average gross sales of $1.1 million a year.
Each one?
Each one.
Oh, wow.
That's an average. So some are doing better. And right now, they said for the last couple of years, each of their dealer installers has been averaging 25% year growth, 25% per year growth. So for a business opportunity, I'm starting to think, man, I just got to
This is mine now. I'm getting territory around Newtown.
I'm just imagining going to like dig deck footings in this thing and like putting an auger in it, and like it just winds all up in the thing. Like your whole lawn is just like.
Oh, you just gave me a belly cramp. Oh, that's too funny. Yeah. Well, I think you'd notice right away. They have a whole page on proper care for your forever lawn. How do you rake leaves on it? There are special tools you can use, or you can use a plastic rake. Don't use a metal rake. And then there's a bunch of other things. So, yeah,
does it smell like a Tractor Supply in the sunshine, though? That's the question I have. You know, there's that very distinct smell of plastics getting heated by the sun.
Well, you know, you're outside. The VOCs are just going into the atmosphere. Dilution is one of the solutions for excess VOCs in your house.
Man.
I mean, the first is eliminate it, but then dilution.
Yeah.
So I see lots of, xeriscaping when we go out to Las Vegas, and that makes a lot of sense, right? Folks in the desert should probably not have grass. And, if you want grass, this seems like a legit solution without having to water it every day, which is the alternative.
Yeah. Right? Or if you've got a really small lawn that who wants to bring out a lawnmower for, I don't know, 50 square feet of grass?
Yeah.
And I mean, that's like, Brooklyn. or the entire New York City area.
Many of the neighbors in the town where I live, it's become a very expensive area, and nobody does their own lawns. They don't mow it. So they've got service fees running $150 to $250 a month between mowing, the landscape, pruning and everything, and all of the chemicals that get put on. Even though this might cost more up front, it's done. You just don't have to deal with any of that, except for the leaf blowing. The only thing, and I was hoping that the show would have kept going so that I could ask the question at the booth to one of the company reps, is how do the dogs and cats feel about this stuff?
Right?
Yeah.
And how do you clean it?
Yeah.
Hose.
Hose it down, yeah.
Yeah. That's
you
going to
guys
be my
have-
business, is plastic trees. No more leaves to rake.
My brother did that. This is a completely off the topic, but my brother had run an event planning business for a little while. So he had a whole bunch of these synthetic trees that he would bring into an event place for a wedding or something like that. After he closed the business, he put them up in his yard. He had palm trees in New England, and they looked real.
That's fantastic. And you guys have final thoughts before we part company this evening?
Hey, I promised you I was going to look up water gen.
Oh, yeah. So we should
I
tell
have-
Matt what this is. So Matt, near as I can tell, and Brian might correct me, but it's a dehumidifier that makes drinking water, right, Brian?
Yeah. So I went to their website and poked around a little bit before this, and I have some stats for you.
Please.
I even used Google to do some converting.
Thank you,
We're
because
in
that
the
was
United
hard for me.
That trick.
So they said it can produce 5 liters with 1 kilowatt hour of power. So I did the conversion, and that, if I did it right, is 21 8-ounce cups of water.
My measurement would be a little more than a gallon, I'm guessing, right?
Well, sure. I don't know. I didn't spend too much time on it, but I thought that was pretty interesting. Basements can get a little bit more. I don't know if somebody's living in their basement now, or, with their office, they might have a little bit more humidity. With the purification, they mentioned ultraviolet and mineralization for filtration. And it seems like it's a company out of Israel. And
That would make sense.
yeah, I think it's pretty interesting to think about doing. With the whole water thing, we had a whole development here that got shut down from being developed because they didn't have enough water, and the city had to work with another city in order to get some. We had a gentleman who bought one of our houses from Hawaii, just to go back to Mike's conversation with water. He got a hold of me saying, "Hey, is this water bill somewhat normal?" So I went and checked. We live in the same development, and yeah, it was because of the amount of irrigation money being spent on water. It is shocking.
Yeah, people can spend $100 or $200 a month watering.
I think it was even higher than that.
Yeah.
But I was able to help him just to go, no, that seems like it's in the world where it should be. And,
what the heck does he need to water? I mean, you guys have little rain in the summer, but do you have to irrigate? Yeah.
First, I think I said it wrong earlier. We have more heating degree days than cooling degree, but anymore, we are getting hotter and hotter summers. I've heard this, I don't know how accurate it is, but they say we're technically in drought conditions. When you get to the end of spring until, usually it's like November 15th, when it really starts to hit the rain, we get very little precipitation. So you're going to have brown lawns everywhere people aren't watering, which isn't the end of the world, but people like to see green.
Wait for that moss.
Moss and clover.
Yeah.
Well, Matt, you won't be able to join us tomorrow. Oh, you're welcome to if you want, but we'll see you guys tomorrow. I'm expecting, right? Mike and Brian. And I think Rob Watzak's going to join us for the final day of coverage of the IBSx. If you all have thoughts on the Builder Show, or if you want to tell us what to do when there isn't one, we'd love to hear from you. please feel free to send those thoughts to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. You guys have any final thoughts?
Nope.
Look forward to seeing it tomorrow.
Likewise, yeah.
Likewise. Well, take care, everyone. Thanks very much for listening. Stay safe. Happy building. Keep craft alive.